sahanavavatu sahanau punuktu sahaviryam karavai tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May He protect us both, may He nourish us, may He make us strong and vigorous, may our studies also be vigorous, may we not cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So, we start off, of course. Are there any questions?
Swamiji, in the pursuit of moksha, liberation, it is in effect, as a person, it's the ego persona pursuing this. What is the purpose of that, of the ego persona pursuing liberation, when the ego persona is never actually going to be reincarnated either way? So who is seeking liberation?
Okay. So we assume we're an individual. We assume that whoever's asking this question is separate and different from any other thing and has a separate life, separate bank account, separate occupation. So if you ask Martin, who are you, or any other person, who are you, then the real answer seldom comes out. What we find is an answer that says, I am so-and-so, son of so-and-so, or my occupation is this. And so that when in a workshop, when we introduce each other, go around in a circle, introduce each other, what comes out is not who you are, but invariably what your background is, what your culture is, what your language is, what your interests are, hobbies, all the things associated with something called I. But the I is assumed to be an individual. And so that's our starting point. Then we take it for granted that I as an individual exist separately and I have some kind of destination somewhere. A kind of linear approach. Born here, ends there. With a gravestone, no doubt. Here lies so-and-so, he was a good chap. Or it might be, you see a cartoon like that, somebody in a coffin with the coffin half open and they're heading for the graveyard. And you can see the cartoon, you see, so there's a balloon that comes out. Wait, I'd like a second opinion. So that's how we view ourselves, as this individual entity. It's not a bad starting point, but it's not a good conclusion. Because Vedanta tells us, in this Bhagavad Gita, at the very beginning, in chapter 2, it tells us of our own immortal nature. Up front means when we are suffering from a most common human malady of stress and distress and grief, when we are down, when we are in a mode of depression, we're in the black hole and see no other way out, when we feel hopeless, then we have one side of people, kind of therapy side, that wants to empathize with us, agree with us, and investigate the past. This is one method in psychology. But in this book we find Krishna acts as a supreme psychologist. That's not his approach at all. He says that you are full and free from the start. You are immortal. You never change. You are the changeless. Fire cannot burn you. Water cannot wet you. Wind cannot dry you. You are neither born nor will you die. You grieve for those people who should not be grieved for. Now, if you do bereavement counseling, you're in trouble if you put that out. Because in bereavement counseling, you say, grief, you should grieve. Grieve is a healthy thing. And no doubt that is so for the vast majority of people, but you see his words are for the wise, but we are not wise. Because if you are wise, you would understand that this freedom that you're seeking is already with you. That's the final conclusion. That when you investigate it properly, although difficult when heard for the first time, you are that immortal thing that you are seeking. And so the whole question of seeking and the whole endeavor of seeking is really, in a way, it's a wild goose chase. You're looking for some kind of perfection, assuming it's not there. But it's a good starting point, saying I'm an individual, and the whole idea of bhakti yoga, that is that approach which is most conducive to most people, is to take all your emotional energy and steer it in one direction. So every system, every yoga demands concentration. And so what is the concentration for the bhakti yogis? The concentration is, and every system of bhakti yoga believes in it, whether it's a Christian system, a Muslim system, or whatever it is, a Jewish system, and we use the Judeo-Christian language, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your strength, all your mind, your whole energy, in other words. All your energy needs to be gathered and then steered and projected into this great love of loves. Why should we love God? It is only because when we look and see what is that at close quarters. Close quarters means not from a distance, not putting an entity as a regime authoritarian figure, but putting something close, understanding that it is a withinness, there's a pervasiveness to this. The nearer our understanding through spiritual practice occurs, the nearer we get to it, the more we understand it. And when we understand it fully, then all this jnana, all this knowledge comes by itself. So when we talk about this ego, we can say I as an essential essence, I, the fundamental me, I, the infinite invisible that sits, as it were, in me. When I talk about that in that language, and then say, where am I headed for? Well, with something that has no moving parts, no evolution in time, transcending all of that. See, doesn't move anywhere. That will be our understanding. But until that happens, it is good to get close in a very sweet and nourishing way, dedicating all our emotions that formerly disturb the mind and putting it into one concentrated beam, as it were, constantly, so that God becomes our constant presence, constant companion, constant beloved. That means that we're in a state of euphoria in the same way as human love creates this euphoria of young love. I always quote this Gilbert and Sullivan passage, or song, not knowing actually fully what the song is, but so my memory is something like this. Lady, lady, misery me lackaday dee, he sip no sup, and that kind of thing. For the sight of a love of a lady. Oh, when you see somebody who's in an abstracted mood, somebody whose eyes glazed over, somebody who is continuously flushed and seems very, very happy, chances are that they are what we call in love. Of course, they can just as easily be out of love. This is the human nature as well. And so this kind of human love has two things. First of all, it's a reflection of a divine love. And the reason why we have it is because of this loving aspect which is there. It's not the only aspect, but it's the aspect that we like to highlight. And so we can see that when we enumerate all the things that are manifestations of that entity, we come to this glorious feeling, this feeling of constant rapture, constant feeling of ecstasy. And that is why this 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is there, because supposing, you see, there's a verse here which we covered even just a few weeks ago. We covered it, so we'll go backwards a little bit, you see. Aham Atma Gurukesha Sarva Buddha Shaya Stitaha. You see, I am the self, O Gurukesha. Gurukesha means the sleepless one, see? The one that is awakened. Hopefully by now, Arjuna, after 10 chapters, something of an awakened entity. Not fully there yet. Takes another few chapters, another 8 chapters goes on after 10th chapter. And the next chapter, all this is leading up to a cosmic vision and his desire for more and more eye-opening experiences. But you see, if we cannot understand or comprehend or tune into this self that is in there, seated in the hearts of all beings, then the alternative is to see the manifestations with eyes open everywhere else. And for this reason, these manifestations are enumerated. 2 kinds of meditation are available to us. One is the meditation that we happened earlier here, that is to sit down and to understand and to tune in to the internal self. I am there as a self, not only in me. If it's in me, it's in all. And that is what is behind the term Purusha, derived from 2 things. Puri, city. The Bhagavad Gita mentions 9 gates to the city. Katha Upanishad tells us 11. So, Ekadasha, so we have this 11-gated city that you enumerated. In other words, you can, if you like this idea every morning, you say thanks for this 11-gated city. With all the highways and byways, not managed by me as an individual entity, but managed by the ruler that sits within, the emperor that sits within. Its presence allows everything to work. Same thing in the cosmos. Its presence allows all the rhythm. What we call God. God is that entity that by its presence coordinates all the rhythm and all the balance in the universe, all the harmony that we see by its presence. Supposing you ask at a physics level, why is it that we have these precise constants? It's a great mystery, unanswered in physics. Knowing that these constants, these laws of the universe are so precise. Cosmological constant is there. If a small fraction changes, then the whole thing collapses. Something called omega, the omega factor, that is the ratio of the movement away, as it were, versus the gravitational pull. The escape velocity has to come to a balance of precisely 1. How is it that we get that? And if it's not precisely that, we don't have a universe at all. And so our philosophical answer is there's some entity that sits there, as it were, theological answer also, that sits there, and by its presence, the whole universe, as its very expression, oscillates and vibrates in a great rhythm, like musical notes, all being coordinated nicely together, like a huge orchestra. If you like this idea that the universe is like a huge orchestra, and you have a musical temperament, then you can imagine that every note has its own particular pitch, but the whole coordinated thing, working all of that in harmony, is a wonderful, beautiful idea. If you think that this universe is a play of waves, then you'll take this supreme entity to be a supreme player, a supreme dancer. If you think it's his creation, you can view that supreme as a creator. And if you think that this is some kind of protected field, then you can view that entity as a protector. Whatever it is, what we do is by enumerating just a few half dozen manifestations of this, you'll get to a chain of causal events that brings you to a supreme essence, something from which all this comes. And so that is why it is important maybe to review the whole of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to do this in conjunction with this because, you see, yesterday we celebrated Swami Abhedananda's birthday. Swami Abhedananda was a remarkable man, great yogi, and also a great intellectual, and a great jnani as well. And he was a great disciple, one of the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And because it was his birthday yesterday and so on, I wanted to bring him in the context of the Bhagavad Gita. One of the remarkable things is his curiosity made him pick up a book. That book was called this Bhagavad Gita. He was 14. And his father, his school teacher, didn't like that. He said, this book is too advanced for you, you'll never understand it. Now the beauty about the Bhagavad Gita is, and we're told so many times in the Gita Dhyanam and so on, is that it is a beautiful bouquet, an assemblage, or it is the essence of the Upanishads. It is like the milk drawn from a cow. And we drink this essence. And Krishna is the one that milks it. This beautiful graphic image is given to us. And previously, of course, people who wanted to study the Upanishads were people of the scholarly temperament, people with who could grasp the abstract concepts in the ancient days, great rishis, discoverers, who had schools of discussion and learning, and felt that we can, in a few statements and sentences, bring about the essence of what we discussed, either in an ashram or a royal court. There are many different types of places where these great Upanishads were taught. And so, to the common person, it means nothing. It was actually Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, who by his commentary brought this Bhagavad Gita to the common people. And then we have an opportunity in a mere 18 chapters of making a whole summary of these Upanishads, this profound philosophy which we have, this great philosophical poem that is given to us. Even then, people find it tough and difficult. And so for them, mythology and stories, the Puranas bring these things out, telling us the great stories. And if that doesn't appeal to you, and singing appeals to you, then you'll find in all the hymns there, what we call bhajans and so on, all these philosophical principles come out. Whether people understand it or not, something must rub off. And so what I'm telling you here, what the Bhagavad Gita is telling you here, is there is common knowledge in the Indian continental psyche. And so Swami Abhedananda, or Kali as he was called, he clandestinely found this Bhagavad Gita where it was hidden, and studied it clandestinely at age 14. And so he's quite fond of quoting from it. And he picks up, for example, in a slight argument, because he learnt a lot of things when he was young, including fishing. And so when the master, that is Sri Ramakrishna, was ill at Kashipur Garden House, it was heard, it was rumoured and understood that this Swami Abhedananda, as he became later, had caught a fish, and the master berated him. So I will read how it went. See, so and the what he quotes in his academic intellectual defense is that quotation, you see, from the Bhagavad Gita. Ya enam viti hantaram yas chainam manyate hatam, like that. He says, you see, Kali was serving his guru, is how the story begins, Sri Ramakrishna, during his last illness at the Kashipur Garden House. There were 2 ponds in the compound, stocked with plenty of fish. Kali was a good angler, and one day he caught some fish, and news of this reached the master. That's how it begins. In the evening, when Kali was serving him, the master asked, "Is it true that you have been catching many fish with a fishing rod?" Not with a net, with a fishing rod. "Yes, sir." Then the master said, "It's a sin to catch fish with a fishing rod, for thereby living beings are killed." I've Sorry, all those fisher people who use the fishing rod, but there's a reason why he's saying this. You see, if you have a great empathy for all living beings, if you see the God within them, then will you catch them for sport? And that entails a certain cruelty because there's a hook there, and that hook is hidden within bait. And so there's a kind of sneakiness about it, unfairness. The fish has no idea. It just sees a worm wriggling. It has no idea that there's a hook inside it. Anyhow, and also, of course, many teachings that a guru gives is for that specific person as well. And the lesson came to this because Kali defended himself. He'd learned fishing. He saw nothing wrong with it. And he brings up this passage from this Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. So he's saying here, in defense, Kali quoted from the Gita. He who thinks that the self is the slayer, as well as he who thinks that the self is slain, is ignorant. For the self neither slays nor is slain. And he further added, so why should it be a sin to catch fish? This is a clever intellectual argument. I'm a person of that type. And Ramakrishna smiled. This is the first reaction. See, some other teacher might have boxed his ears and sent him away. But Ramakrishna's reaction was smile. Very typical. And tried to make Kali understand through various arguments. He said, when a person attains true knowledge, he does not take a false step. Suddenly the master began coughing, and there was a trace of blood in his sputum. And frightened by this, Kali told him, sir, talking will aggravate your cancer. Please do not talk any more. But the master said, I consider you to be one of the most intelligent of the boys. You will understand if you meditate on what I have said. You see, this whole scripture and everything that comes from the Guru, and those people who we revere as wise people, enlightened people, people who have some kind of attunement with this divine, what they say, you have to meditate on. All this Bhagavad Gita came from meditation. Then we can argue, of course, to the cows come home, as it were, whether you were able to deliver a sermon of 18 chapters on a battlefield and a cosmic vision occurring and all these things. But that's not the point. So what is the point? The point is that when you study Shastra, you study it by listening to it, reflecting on it deeply, trying to understand its inner meaning objectively. That is not necessarily agreeing with it, and then finally meditating on it, because it is the reverse of how it came out. It came out from meditation and got delivered, ultimately broadcast. So meditate on this, what I've just told you. That means get away from the intellect. Get away from the intellect and understand in a deeper way what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. So, according to Sri Ramakrishna's instructions, Kali meditated for 3 days and realized the meaning behind his statement. And he went to the master and said, Sir, I have now realized why it is wrong to catch fish. I shall not do it again. Please forgive me. The master was very pleased to hear this. He said, it is deceitful to catch fish in this way, hiding a hook inside bait and hiding poison in food offered to an invited guest are sins of the same kind. Kali humbly accepted what the master said and felt his infinite compassion. Ramakrishna continued by way of explanation. It is true that the Atman does not die, nor is it killed. I accept that fully, what you said. But that's just on the surface. It's just so many words. Do you actually understand it? But he who has realized the truth, this truth is the Atman himself. So why should he have the tendency to kill others? If you think that the Atman is there with the fishing rod, you'll also understand that the same divine entity is the fishing rod, is the water, is the fish, is everything. And so you won't create any suffering. As long as the tendency to kill remains, the tendency to kill. That is not a sattvic thing, an impure thing. He is not identified with the Atman, nor does he have any self-knowledge. As long as you think of killing something, you're putting yourself in a subject-object relationship. You don't think you're the Atman. At that point you say, I am the fisherman, and fish is what I'm going to catch. Yes?
So, but in cosmic balance, like even at the start of the Gita, Krishna instructed Arjuna to kill his extended family because for the greater good.
No, he's instructing him to do his duty.
His duty.
Yeah.
But
his duty as a soldier.
As a soldier, but to remain detached, but he still had to kill.
Yeah, you have to focus on he's doing his duty. Yeah. And military people's duty is defense, and killing is involved. You don't have to do it. But there are some things that we all have to kill. And Ramakrishna puts it beautifully, lust and greed. Puts it very as simply as possible, lust and greed. These are your enemies, you see. You see the evening Vespers thing that we, song that we sing, you see. Conqueror of lust and greed. What a great hero to conquer these two enemies. So conquer that inside you. But each must do his own duty. If there were no policemen, everybody would rob banks. They would have the license. Why are banks not empty? Is because nobody robs them. Why don't they rob them? Because there's security and security guards and all that around. Human nature being human nature, all the banks will be emptied tomorrow if these security measures were not in place. So there has to be some kind of social structure whereby everyone does their own duty and plays their own part. Like building a building, not everybody can be the quantity surveyor, not everybody can make the roof, not everybody can do the interior decorating, not everybody can do the plumbing or the electrical connections. It requires speciality. Not everybody can be the architect, but all these coming together make a building. And so the universe that we live in has many, many different parts, and they all come together. And I won't tell you the old joke, of course, about the jigsaw puzzle, unless you want me to. You heard about the jigsaw puzzle? All right.
No, please tell us.
Oh, see, at the risk now of repeating old jokes. So a simple man came into the city, you see, very, very pleased with himself, and he met a friend, urban man from the city, and he said, you see what's happened? He says, I'm so proud of myself. Since I last met you, I managed to put this jigsaw puzzle together. And his friend said, that's beautiful, let me see how many, and he said, yes. And he said, you know, it already took me 6 months. He says, 6 months? Must be a colossal thing. And then he discovered it was only 12 pieces. So he says, that's not very impressive. I'm sorry, respect you, but it's not a major feat because only 12 pieces. He says, no, you don't understand. It took me 6 months. He says, no, I don't think you understand. It's only 12 pieces. He says, no. Look on the box. It says 2 to 4 years. All right. So the point is, everything is meshed in its own way. It fits in beautifully. Don't ask why all these constants are there, all these laws of nature are there. They are there because there's a harmonizing presence. And within that harmonizing presence, every section fits beautifully. And so what we call life is death. Birth and death are two sides of the same coin. And if you want to be philosophical about it and say, what is the cause of death? You might say, well, the prerequisite is birth. And then you might go on to say, well, what is the prerequisite for birth then? And you might say death. So it goes on. So when we understand this, we understand, even if it was not true, that this Atman is there, and therefore we should neither grieve for the living nor the dead. Even if that wasn't true, the fact of the matter is, everything is born, and everything lives, and everything dies. This argument is also presented. It will happen anyway. When it happens, it can happen today, it can happen on a battlefield, it can happen in a car accident, it can happen through disease, it can happen just through old age, breakdown of the body, many different ways, but one thing's guaranteed. This death will occur to all of us. And the Buddhists have a wonderful meditation technique. They imagine, and we've done this in workshops also with you, you imagine that there is your own body in front, and you can register all the various steps of decay. But if you identify with the body, you'll be thoroughly distressed. Supposing you're able to learn to free yourself from this vehicle and say, let us use it. See St. Francis' prayer, make me an instrument of your peace. See, the instrumentality comes in with the knowledge. You immediately understand. Not only that, but there's a humility that goes with it, and an openness and a submission that goes with it, that comes with devotion. Lord, I'm yours. Please do with this what you want. So we go on here. So as long as the tendency to kill remains, he is not identified with the Atman, nor does he have any self-knowledge. That is why I say that when one attains true knowledge, one does not take any false step. And you should realize that the Atman is beyond the body, the sense organs, the mind, the intellect, and that is the witness of the phenomena. So with that, how can you say, I fish? The Master's words penetrated Kali's heart, and he realized the truth. It's a remarkable life, in fact, Kali Prasad. He was called that because, you see, his mother, there were great mortality rates, and in his family, there were 9 children, and 5 of them did not survive. So 4 of them left, and he was the second down, but the mother's prayer was to Mother Kali, God in that form, please may I have a son, and so he was named in this way. All of these, this is taken, by the way, from this book here. See? So, God lived with them, by Swami Abhedananda, and there's a companion book which turns the title around, They Lived with God, denoting some of the lay disciples and women disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And this is a prized copy because it's signed by the author also when he was here. And he presented us with this copy. You see, when we study these, there are 2 things. First of all, we find the truth of the scripture that we are studying. So there's a verification of the personalities involved and the material that is being studied. And secondly, a life inspires us because it sets before us the ideal that we can all live up to. There's a tendency to say, oh, that person is, see, there was a story of a great saintly man, and the housekeeper couldn't really get on with him and complained to one of the church hierarchies and said, about this man, and his remark was, saints are all right in heaven, but they're hell to live with on earth.
They're what?
Hell to live with on earth.
Oh.
See, they're all right in heaven, but hell to live with on earth. Now what the meaning of that really is that, you see, these great people live a life which is special. That doesn't mean to say they are special. It means the life they cultivated was different from the norm. In the language of the Gita, the yogi, when others sleep, the yogi remains awake, and vice versa. So it requires concentration, whichever path you take up, and Bhakti Yoga requires this commitment of energy, not just in a forced way. In the beginning it may well be in a forced way, until we understand, the glory. And if you cannot meditate, as I say, on the self within, which is the first thing that is mentioned here, then we have to look to the various manifestations. The whole, just to remind you of the whole profile then of this Bhagavad Gita, it starts off with a human condition of despair and grief, and in the modern language it starts off with tension, it starts off with an unsettled mind, it starts off with something that most people are looking for. And so how do we deal with this unsettled state of affairs? Exhibited through the various symptoms of grief. Patanjali Yoga Sutras mentions these symptoms. Shaking of the body, see. All of these symptoms are put there, a grief, irregular breathing, and so on. All of these are symptoms of what? From Patanjali Yoga Sutra point of view, from lack of concentration. And that's really what it is. All our energy is dissipated everywhere, and so this concentration isn't with us. Whether it is doing every action in a detached and mindful way called Karma Yoga, detached from the results or the fruits of your action, or whether it is through the method of discernment, discriminating between what is permanent, impermanent, real, unreal. All of this, by the way, is catered for here in this Bhagavad Gita. And the second chapter is constructed in such a way, second chapter and 18th chapter, these are constructed in such a way that these are the longest chapters. So second chapter says, these are the principles, and an outline at the end of this is an indication of the practice. And then at the end, this is the summary of it. This is how you should practice. And then in between, a detailed account from different points of view, broadly from 3 different directions, encompassing Karma Yoga, encompassing ultimately Jnana Yoga from 13th chapter onwards, and also Bhakti Yoga. With one chapter, chapter 6, being dedicated to Dhyana Yoga or meditation. But yet, in a sense, this 10th chapter is also meditation. So, let us take up then, we mentioned last week, it's well worth repeating, because some of these manifestations are manifestations we're not familiar with. And if this is a universal book, then we have to see if we can bring it within a more modern context. Because some of these entities and figures and characters that are being mentioned are very ancient, partly mythological, and maybe actually real, but in different dimensions of this universe. We have to understand how the Vedic people viewed this existence as this world, another world, and in between. So this world, what we call this Bhumi, this earth, is one realm. And what we understand by it really is as far as the eye can see. And modern man can see further in terms of their vision than people of the past, through telescopes and so on, and at a more minute level through electron microscopes and so on. So our range of vision is much greater, much deeper, much greater. This is the observable universe and contains all these components. And when we say that there are 33 of these luminaries, the 33 was originally, by the way, in the Vedas, divided 11, 11, 11 for each realm. And gradually it became something different, as 11 Rudras, and the Vasus would be 8, and 12 Adityas. Aditya coming from Aditi, whose is really a name for the sun. It also meaning a kind of eternal one, an endless entity, and something that is shining. Therefore, an epithet also of the sun. And so therefore, the sun for us becomes a symbol, great, great symbol. Not just the physical sun that we have. But don't forget, when we talk of that entity that we need to describe in theistic or worshipful or adorative terms, we find that the same thing, the same qualities that we give the sun are the same qualities we give the Supreme. So just to remind you, I've said it before, that it radiates, it's beautiful, it's a life giver, it gives life to everything. And therefore, we see the sun as a great symbol. If you can't think of a human form or a particular Ishtadevata or something like that, something that is formless and that you require something to grasp, something to imagine, then maybe the sun is a good symbol of it, something that is shining. And of course we know that many Irish people are sun worshippers in Spain in the summer months. So, Adityas are mentioned, Vasus are mentioned, and Rudras are mentioned, indicating these three realms of this observable universe. And then at the other extreme, anything that is beyond our range, way beyond our range, where there's no reason to believe that shining ones, shining entities, governing forces, other entities, other beings live. Today it's not science fiction when scientists say we think there may be other forms of life out there. But of course they're still talking of the observable universe. But they're now talking, of course, of parallel universes, bubble universes, multiverses, etc. And some of that is to say that these are universes within our own dimensions, unseen because they are not within our strict frame of reference or our strict wavelengths, if you will. And Swami Vivekananda also does not dismiss these possibilities. And then what about in between? There's the interspace in between. Interspace in between, we now know that space is a bubbling thing. There's no such thing as empty space, according to modern science. So we'd find that it is something like a kind of TV set that is badly tuned. Maybe in the old days, I don't know. So you find just these spots on the screen and hissing noise, something like that. Or, as I like to say, just for the Irish consumption, something like an alcoholic drink, a Guinness drink, where the bubble is there and it's important to get a good head on the drink. And you can see all these bubbles rising to the top wonderfully, and some of them evanescing and others collapsing back. So it's seen that the universe is something like this, something like quantum fields like that. And so what is this? This is kind of space and matter combined. What we call Akasha, and it was pointed out to me today, quite rightly, that it comes from, see, the city of Kashi. There is a shining city. So Akasha is the thing that shines, shining thing. So the source, the unmanifest source of the material universe is something that has the potentiality to shine forth. It's no surprise, therefore, that we have light as a result. So, of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. That is that entity that is found everywhere, pervades everywhere. And when we look at the sun, doesn't its rays pervade everywhere? Or even if we look at air, doesn't air seem to pervade everywhere? Or if we look at space, doesn't seem to be everywhere? Something like that. And so this entity that pervades everywhere is the most supreme form of this Aditya that we can imagine. Even though in the ancient days, in the Rig Veda in fact, really only 3 references, or 5 references I think, are there to Vishnu. You see, sometimes we think Vishnu is a separate entity, but actually it's an epithet, it's a description, the thing that pervades everywhere. and then we take it to be something separate. Of the luminaries, the radiant sun, there it is again. And I am Marichi, that is the chief, if you like, of the wind deities, the wind entities, Maruts, and of the asterisms, that is those entities that we can view, the moon, that is the reflective bodies. And he says, I am. With this we covered last week anyway. And then goes on, bearing in mind that our job is to take a few dozen examples of this, not to take the whole lot necessarily and go on forever, but to take a few selected examples that can help guide the mind back to blissful base. And so of the scriptures, Vedanam samavedosmi, Devanam asmi vasavaha, Indriyanam manaschasmi, Bhutanam asmi chetana. Of the Vedas, I am the Sama Veda, that is, the most beautifully recited part of the Vedas. In the ancient ceremonial traditions, or the rituals of the ancients, they had more than one priest that was responsible for the yajna, and so you had to have a supervising entity and a singing, chanting entity, and you had one who's doing the mantras. So all of those come into play. And so what is the most charming of all the Vedas? It must be those delightfully sang, reflecting this beautiful sonic aspect of the universe. I am sound, in other words. And whenever you hear, therefore, a sound, any piece of music, not just a piece of music, around the 1960s, classical musicians decided we'll abandon all, in Western music that is, decided to abandon all standards and norms to do with Beethoven, Mozart, and so on, and decided that they would modernize things. And some of the modern attempts were like this. The idea was, we'll strip away all rules of music, and every sound surely is musical. So if we have a hacksaw just scraping along a window pane or something, it makes a noise, we'll record that. See? So all of this kind of classical revolution took place, which became highly unsatisfactory, highly displeasing to the ear, and passed off as music. But the principle of it is sound. You forgive the pun. Because you see, everything that you hear requires a sequence of complex events. It requires a medium through which the waves of the sound travel.
The Beatles did that in one of their albums. It was either Sgt. Pepper's or Abbey Road, where they just told the orchestra to play whatever they thought. Yeah. And they played notes backwards and everything. And it's actually on one of the tracks. Yeah. And it's hailed as a great piece of music.
The Beatles, even insects, even crickets, when they like this, creates a beautiful sound and vibration. But that's the whole idea. The whole idea is, if we can view all sounds in a sacred way, because of the, apart from anything else, because of the complex sequence of events, some vibration occurs. The whole world is really these oscillations of vibrations. So that even in modern physics, the idea is fundamentally, if you want a theory of everything, string theory. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. But the concept is very similar. That there are these strings, or loop theory, which is like a whole lot of key rings joined together, that kind of thing. So some kind of vibration is there, and that vibration then is carried through in such a way that the ear that we have, not standard ears, every creature has different ones, catches that particular frequency, that particular wavelength, and it doesn't end there. See how the ear is shaped as an amplifier. See how there's a tympanum that reverberates. See how there's a nervous current that takes it to the brain. And the brain then allies it to previous sounds experienced and interprets it and says, makes a determination, it is this. And some beautiful sounds are available, given to us free. Sounds of birds, sounds of the wind, sounds of children, for us, sounds of children at play, you know, across the way, delightful sounds. sounds of a footstep that can be either taken in a friendly way or as a warning system. It's nature's way, by the way, of warning us. So that if you're in Africa, for example, and you want to go on safari, or as some people call it, safari, you go on there and you see, if you want to come close to an animal, you have to make sure that you're not downwind. So they have a sense of scent. And then that you are not visible and you don't make any rustling noise anywhere. So it's a wonderful miracle, all these senses and how they're tuned in to the vibrational rate around us is a wonderful miracle. How the photon is taken in and how the retina is able to create an image and how the brain changes it from an upside down position to an upright position, and all these things are there. And all of these things can be contemplated. And so also I am Vashava, that is Indra among the Devas, among the shining ones, that is Indra. Indra really was for a long time chief of the gods and deposed because Indra represented this familiar world of rainfall and so on, but there's a deeper dimension. Vishnu is the one that pervades everywhere. And of course Indra became unpopular because he was always warring, he was always at war with somebody or other. And so the meaning of that is, and the meaning also in the story about Krishna there, in him deposing, if you will, Indra and challenging Indra. Don't worship Indra. And then Indra then has a repercussion and sends a flood of rain and so on. We are familiar with the story. Krishna lifts up the mountain as an umbrella. That kind of thing is there. And essentially saying, let us look at a deeper thing, because rainfall, no doubt, is there. But the source of the rain and the governance of the rain ultimately is something much deeper. And so of the senses, I am the mind. The mind is the queen bee of all the senses. When the mind goes somewhere, all the senses have to go along with it. And so it is the mind in the Samkhya way of understanding the mental makeup. Then the senses are a part of the mind, along with the mind as a receptive faculty and reactionary faculty, and an intellect which is a deciding and executing faculty. All of this is part and parcel of the mind, along with a sense of I, ego. So that's the geography of the mind, accepted everywhere. So I am the mind. That is, I am in the commanding position. That is, anything that is a superlative quality or a superlative position, that I am. As soon as you see this, you'll see this is an exhibition of my glory. And among living beings, I am consciousness. Consciousness is the hard problem now, according to the modern neuroscientists. And recently, one of our devotees made a beautiful scientific paper on this question of consciousness using measurements associated with brain waves that we can actually identify as the various vrittis, the 5 varieties of waves that we find in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. That is right knowledge, wrong knowledge, verbal delusion, as well as memory and sleep. These are all there measured at certain frequencies as delta waves, beta waves, alpha waves, and so on, all mathematically calculated. And so we know where consciousness in that sense objectively arises from. But I am consciousness means I am the subject. I am the eternal thing reflected in intelligence, reflected in self-awareness. These are such beautiful, beautiful subjects for our contemplation. And so as wealth distinguishes the wealthy man, these glories also reveal the Lord, and we should not take them for granted. And then it goes on, Rudranam samskarascha asmi Videsho Yaksharakshasham Vashunam Bhavakaschasmi Meruha Sikrinam Aham. I of the Rudras, another body governing it. I am Shankara, that is the auspicious, the giver of auspiciousness, of the Yakshas, other beings, and Rakshasas, I am Kubera. That is, these entities that live in heaven and so on and so forth, who live on the basis of desire and get all their desires fulfilled, even those highest ones are the Vasus, that is, those who dwell in different places. I am Bhavaka and of mountains. I am Mount Meru, indicating that we are standing in an upright position, and that upright position enables our freedom, because in the yogic language we have this opening of our potentiality, this coiled up thing, kundali, coiled up, that opens up these various levels of consciousness of the mind and gives us a supreme unity of understanding. These Vasus are 8 in number: land, water, fire, air, ether, moon, sun, star. These constitute the gross structure of nature. So we can see this is the observable universe that we're talking about. And so it goes on. So of priests, O Partha, know me to be the chief, Brihaspati of the generals. I'm Skanda, and of bodies of water, I am the ocean. Some of these we have to investigate. What do we mean by all of these things? But Skanda is the active portion there. Shiva having 2 sons, Ganapati. Ganesha is a little more portly and happy to sit. And so there's the famous story that Swami Abhedananda tells over and over about Saraswati and sorry, not Saraswati, Parvati, and challenging, can you go, all around the world, have a competition between 2 sons? And Ganesha says, I'll go through the whole world, but he's very slow moving. He perambulates Parvati and of course comes back even before Skanda has a chance to go around. But Skanda is required because it represents the dynamic nature of things. So all of these things, of the great rishis, I'm Bhrigu, of utterances, I'm the monosyllable Om. Of yajnas, I am the Japa Yajna. And of the unmoving things, the Himalaya, we can take a few of those things. See, Om. So Om, we know, is the primordial sound symbol of the Supreme. It is the first tremor, the first movement that manifests everything else. It is the sum totality which is there. And so comprising Om, because the tongue has to move in 3 different directions. Swami Abhedananda gives a beautiful elaboration of the meaning of this. So next week what we'll do, we'll elaborate some of these things and then move on. And we're not far off the end of the chapter, because what is recommended is that you in advance read all of these glories to get some idea and see how you can apply these which are observed and some of them not, and some of them implied, and see how they can lead you to a sense of the source of divine, the essence of everything, and see how that will change your evaluation of the world and give you a positive outlook. Positive outlook means not orientated toward doubt and temptation of the past, or orientated toward anxiety about the fruits of actions in the future, or success in the future. That is, if you concentrate, you're living entirely in this particular moment with all its fullness and glory here and now. And so, to lead you to this position in the meditative way, this is why we have this Vibhuti Yoga. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.